Hello and welcome to module number 2. This module we have a new problem. The problem is a statement, or what comes to us is says allow the user develop an app that allows the user to select a color and use it to change the background color of a second screen, and in addition draw on the second screen. This one sentence description of the problem is usually what you're gonna get in the beginning. This will be if you're in the market, someone will come to you, or you're sitting with friends and somebody will say, why can't we have an app that does that? Or it comes to your mind, or someone will say, I want to pay you some money to create an app that does that. That is one sentence. You want to write that one sentence, or even ask them to write it for you, and from that one sentence we engage in the app development process in an iterative way to produce the app at the end. So it's like there is an input and there's an output, and there is a process in the middle that take you from the input to the output. The input is always the same. One sentence, one line description of an idea that needs to be an app. The output is a fully functional app that achieves that initial idea. In the middle is what we are trying to learn in this class. And in addition to coding, some think, okay, app development is about coding. I want you to step to the bigger picture above just the coding. It's a process where we're going to develop a software, and that process requires multiple things than just the coding. The coding is part of it. So I don't want you to limit your vision or your focus on just how can I write this piece of code. We are talking about how we can make that piece of software, how we can create it and develop it to work for the people who want that software in the first place and achieve their objective and their outcome. To help you with that process, I am introducing an iterative three-step app development process. The 3 steps is problem formulation, solution formulation, and solution implementation. Those 3 steps are applied in an iterative way, to go from the input, which is the single sentence, all the way to the functional output. There are so many advantages to think about your app development in this manner. One of them is you don't know much when you start about that end product. So it's not like there is an end product already and you're going to make an example of it, or you're going to copy it, or you're going to make some changes to it. That end product doesn't exist and you're going to create it. So following an iterative process help you build your experience and knowledge as you go from one step to the other. The second main advantage is whoever wants this app, they are like you. They do not know what that end product look like because it doesn't exist. They haven't seen it. They have the money, they have the idea, but they never saw that end product. Your job is to help them evolve their vision of that product as you go along. Because every step of the way, every iteration you make, you produce a working piece of that end product, a working area of that end product. When they see it, they will evolve. And the app development, the iterative app development process allow your client as well as yourself as developer to grow together in your understanding of what that end product is. The client from the point of view of using that end product, and you as a developer from gaining the technical skills, the technical know-how, and context understanding and appreciation that allow you to produce a wonderful product that achieves the end goal. All right, let's get into business. So iteration 1 is always the planning iteration. This is a standard. It's where you can take that single sentence and produce the scope, produce a general overview of your technical solution, and plan the execution of your iteration plan and create the timeline and so on. Sometimes maybe we can call this a kickoff. It's the planning and the kickoff, putting everything together, putting everything in order, and getting ready to move forward with your product. So what do we do in that iteration? Every iteration, you do these 3 steps. 1, 2, and 3. So iteration 1 is the problem formulation. Let's apply the app development process within the context of iteration 1. So 3 steps: problem formulation, solution formulation, and solution implementation. In the problem formulation in iteration 1, we want to define the scope of the problem and how will we test it. When we finish an app, how would we know that it works? There is a step actually before that, and I'm not going to spend much time on it, but next module I will spend more time on it, is research. You research 2 things. You research context. Well, let's take out you. Research context and market. Context, here we're talking about drawing and coloring. If you have a design background, you probably know everything about that context. But if you come from, I come from an engineering background, I know nothing about colors and drawing. I know mechanical drawing and engineering drawing, but I don't know the painting in that sense. I don't know much about it. So then you as a developer, don't get yourself to create an app for a context you know nothing about. You have to learn the context. Remember, you're creating a piece of, I don't want to say a piece of art, but you're creating a functional product that people will use on a daily basis. It needs to touch them, to talk to them, to be part of their life. If you don't understand their life and what they do, you will never have a product that connects with them. So research, scope, context, and market. And the market is what's out there in the market, what they're missing, what new can you add, and so on. The scope is in specific terms, sometimes even contractual terms, what the app will do. You may say this is basically a rewrite of that single sentence. It's a rewrite with some elaboration. And you elaborate as much as you know. So you may know very much. Sometimes you have somebody who has a very clear, specific idea, and sometimes they don't know much. So you have to define something your own and get the agreement. So we'll say, for instance, in this, we need the user able to select a color, to construct a color. Construct a color. And the other one is user able to navigate to another screen to view that color, or able to navigate to another screen where the color can be used for painting or display. Yeah, that's a good way. I want to say something here. The app development process is a design process. Some of you may come from a design background or engineering background or any other background where the concept of a design process is not foreign to you. You've been exposed to it. And some of you, maybe this is your first time. Design process basically means there is no single solution. There is no 1 + 1 = 2. There are many possibilities of the outcome. We know the input. We're going to engage you through a process, but that engagement depends on you, depends on the client, depending on the context. So the end product will be a factor not just of the input, but also of you, your decisions as a developer, your taste, what you like, what you don't like, as well as your client who will engage with you in those views. So as I write those answers, I want you to take them for what they are. It's my implementation of the app development process. Your implementation can be different. So you may rephrase those sentences differently, and they achieve the same thing. You may rephrase them. So allow yourself the freedom to answer the question as you want. You may look at me and say, I don't know anything else. Well, this means you're still beginning. So in the beginning, you follow until you develop your own abilities. So keep following. We have 5 modules, 5 different problems. Keep following until it clicks with you and feel confident enough to answer your, or to provide your own answers. Testing scenarios. So what are the testing scenarios? So we can say testing scenario 1 is that user select a color. Testing scenario 2, and the app formulates or constructs that color. Testing scenario 2, user navigate from one screen or click on navigation or selects to navigate, because I don't know how they will do that yet, and the app will change from one screen to another. Testing scenario 3, on the second screen, the user views the selected color, or if you go with the painting option, or paint using the selected color. Alright, very simple scenarios for now, but these are the main functionalities. As you go through the iterations, you may know a little bit more, so maybe in future iterations you spill out these scenarios more. It does not matter how specific these are at this stage. You write what you can and move on. Do not get stuck trying to find the perfect answer. Move on. Write what comes to mind and move on. Trust that the iterative process will get you to the outcome. Right? Solution formulation. Sorry about that sound. Solution formulation is also it's 3 steps. Step 1 is the model. We think of the solution in terms of 3 components. The data, in particular, what data the app will use, and how to represent the data in the software universe. The model and the view. The view represents the user interface. What components the user will see and interact with. And then the third is the controller, which is the logic or the brain or the functionality of the app. What actions the app will respond to, and how to respond to it, and how it will respond to it, and how it will respond to it. So in the model, here, from what we know so far, we know that we're going to have a color. So what is a color? A color in real life, you see it, but you may know from real life that there are something called basic colors. Or let's just stay here. There's just the color, and maybe in the research we should have done some context research on the color. What is a color? And because you need to get a better understanding of color in order to think about how do we simulate the color in the software universe, because that's what this app is about, really. It's about a color and how do we simulate it. So to simulate a color in the software universe, you ask your question, how can I simulate a color? And the answer to this question is rephrasing the question to what iOS library can simulate a color. Sometimes in the model there are iOS libraries already existing, and sometimes there aren't any. Like we will see in module number 5, we would have a data item, but there's no iOS library to simulate it, so we're gonna have to create our own. But here there is actually one called the UI color. How do we find that out? In the beginning, I'm telling you, but after that, you will see. You can Google. You will have your own vocabulary of the iOS library, so you can look up for something or make your own. So that's the color. In the research on color, you will learn that one way to represent the color is the basic colors, and there are basic colors. There is the red, there is the green, and there is the blue, meaning that any color is a combination of is a mix of a portion of red, portion of green, and portion of blue. In addition, there is the opacity of the color, usually represented by something called alpha. There are other ways to construct a color, but that's just one way. You can Google color, what is a color or a digital color, because we're working in transforming a physical domain to a digital domain, or what I call software universe. So aimed by this knowledge, in addition to the color, the model will also need to have the representation of red component of the color, and then representation of the blue component of the color, and then the representation of the green component of the color. Then we have the representation of the percentage of opacity. Is this color 100% opaque or 0% opaque, which means it's fully transparent, so you can't really see it, or anywhere in between? So each one of those can be represented by a number, and learning about the UI color, and this is a piece of information I'm providing to you, that number in the UI color has to be a number between 0 and 1. So it is what we call a decimal color between 0 and 1.1. So you would say that I have a color made of 0.1 red, 0.3 blue, and 0.6 green at 50% opacity. So this is a decimal color. We represent decimal color but by a type called float. This is a type responsible for representing decimal color. So this is also a number between 0 and 1. It's a decimal color, and we're going to use float to represent that color. So there are two questions, remember, what data the app will use, which is a physical question, and how to represent the data in the software universe, which is a memory question. What kind of memory location do I need, and how I can represent that memory location? And I'm using iOS library component that already exists either in the foundation framework or in the user interface framework to represent those physical numbers. So a number between 0 and 1, so that's again is decimal. And then the same thing for the others, so I'm just gonna copy it here, enough typing. Alright, so that's our model. Now let's go to the view, what the user will see and how they will interact with it. So the user needs two components really. We need a component for the user to enter a number between 0 and 1, and we need a component to display the mixed color for the user so that they know is that the right mix or not. Because you know, when you construct something, you're putting a little bit of red, a little bit of green, a little bit of blue. You want to see what is the result so you can decide is this what you want or not. So we're going to use a library component called UI slider for the user to give us a number. Now, the user need to give me 4 numbers, not one. One for the red, one for the blue, one for the green, one for the alpha. So then I'm going to need to use 4 components of the UI slider. Then I need to display the color for the user. So all what I need is a space that I can color. So I'm going to use UI view, which is a rectangle component, and I will use the background color. Of a UI view component to display the color. So every time the user mixes a color, I'm going to change the background of a UI view component and show the user that color. So the controller, what the app will do, what actions or functionality. So the app will load. It's not going to open any files as we did in module 1. It's not going to do anything. So the app really, there's no internal events, no response to internal events, at least at this time. And so the app will really be triggered the moment the user select a color. So the action that the app will respond to, user selects a color. On the UI slider, it means that user will move a slider. That's the action. Or maybe not user select a color, I'm sorry. User enters a number for one of the color components. I think this video may have gone too long, so I need to wrap it up. I don't like to make long videos. User enters a number for one of the color components. That's the action. On the slider, it means the user will move the slider. So what response, what actions, how will it respond? How the app will respond. The app will respond by following this flowchart or algorithm. So what the app will do is it will read the number that the user entered to figure out what number they entered. Then it will construct a new color using the components, the component and the number. It needs to know, did the user select a red on what percentage, blue what percentage, green what percent. Then construct a color using the components weights or that the user entered, and then use that color to as the background color of a UI of the UI view, and I'm gonna use a word here, object, just to introduce you to new words. UI view object. Right, so that's what the app will need to do. You may be completely lost now, you have no thing, but notice something. Other than these bold items, I'm just thinking logically here. Imagine you're trying to solve this problem on a piece of paper. That's really everything I have done so far, except for the bolded items, like when I'm telling you which component will do what thing. So there is a thinking process that you must get used to, and it requires discipline. I want to tell you that a lot of people, they want to jump into coding, and this is not the way to do it. You have to respect the thinking steps that must happen so that the code you create and the app you create and the user interface you create make sense and work together in harmony with the intent and interest of the user. So solution implementation, that's the planning. Remember, this is the kickoff, so I need to plan my iterations. So iteration 1 is what we're doing now, called the planning. Iteration 2 is project setup. Same, this is going to always be the case. Always be the case. And then iteration 3, what do we want to do next? So what I want to do next, for me, I break this into smaller pieces. So I will first construct a color using only a red component. If I succeed in this, then construct a color using only a red and blue components, or any others. If I succeed, then construct a color using all components. And that's the end of part 1. So that's part 1 for those of you who are taking this class. This is part 1. Construct a color using all components. Then part 2 starts from the navigation. Now we need to navigate to a second screen. Iteration 7 will be use the color or to transition the color, or to transfer the selected color from the first screen to the next. So how do I know that it transferred and use it for display? So then iteration 8, and this, by the way, 6 and 7 is part 2 for the undergraduate section. Then iteration 8, that's extra credit for the undergraduate section, and the part of the second part for the graduate section, which is paint on the second screen using the selected color. So I designed 4 iterations. 1 through 5 is part 1. 6 and 7 part 2 for the undergraduate, and 8 is extra credit. 6, 7, and 8 are part 2 for the graduate section. So this is it for our module 2 project. Can't wait to work with you through it. So let's move on and move to the next one.